Well, welcome back to Speaking Llama, a Survivor podcast. We've got the latest castaway of Titans versus Rebels on the podcast with us today. Eden, how are you doing today?
I'll have to greet you in the ceremonial way.
My man,
Yes, yes.
you may be the first Australian player who understands the podcast name. Thank you. We've been waiting years.
Good, good. I'm so glad. I'm so glad. Of course, I know what's going on, team.
Incredible. Ian, just made my day. Well, so excited to chat with you. I do have to say, while I loved your gameplay this season, the one thing I loved more was your face anytime JLP told you to go vote. And that interaction made my day every time you were at tribal council.
Oh, so me and JLP got on so well out there. It was great. Like we started to get a lot of the banter at challenges, like the one where we were holding up the barrels. That I'm doing that. I'm looking at JLP. I'm like, JLP, do you think it's about the time right now that I should dig deep? And he goes, Eden, you know as well as I do in Survivor, you always got to dig deep, my friend. And I was like, yes. So we got on great. Like JLP, yeah, it was really getting the immunity cup from him that first time, shaking his hand, and he could see how excited I was. In fact, the first match chat we had, literally, he points to me, he goes, tall guy just at the back there. You have not stopped smiling the entire time you've been out here. You must be one of the biggest fans we've ever had on. And I was like, you just blew up my super fanness in front of everyone, but I love it. And I don't think I could have held out any longer.
Oh, that's incredible. Well, yeah, that leads right to our first question here. So as a big fan of Survivor, what's the feeling out there when you step on the mat for the first time, you get out there? I mean, what's going through your brain as a fan of the show?
Literally, like, guys, this is something that I've been a fan for 23 years, right? I've been watching since day one back in the day. And I've been auditioning since Australian Survivor came back for the last 8 years. Every single year I audition. The first year, 2016, I got really close to getting on. And then I didn't at the last minute. And then I got cut and I never heard from them again. So, and I never gave up hope though. I kept going. In fact, during the time when we didn't have Australian Survivor, I actually started going into the USA green card lottery to get my green card so I could apply for US Survivor. Yes. And I was like, God, that's a great story. Jeff Probst is going to love that. Didn't turn out.
That is, I literally had this conversation with Alex earlier this week, or like last week. I was like, I wonder how I can be an Australian resident because I want to be on Australian Survivor, right? So I totally get the impulse.
But I know. And then eventually, look, I made it on. The stars aligned, and to actually get out there. And honestly, I couldn't stop smiling. Every challenge I saw, I was like, oh, that's from this. Oh, this is cool. Oh, there's my torch. Oh, we're gonna like blindside people. And on the first day, it's so funny. We get out there, right? And I'm looking around and we have to build our shelter. And I'm going, oh, okay. So looking around for the older guy that they always have on that sort of knows a bit about construction and building and they can put some stuff together. I'm like, where's sort of the older guy in the tribe? And I'm looking around and then I realize, oh, I'm the older guy on the tribe. I'm the one that's meant to know how to build the shelter. And I'm like, oh God, this is going to be bad. And eventually, and granted, it was one of the worst shelters they've ever seen in the show, our original Titan one. Until I won us the tarp, I'm going to say me and Charles won us the tarp, and game changed after that. I knew how important that was. But every single, all the feedback I got when I was out there, and even when I was back home watching it, the feedback that kept coming back was like, you know what's so great about watching you on the show? We're literally watching someone live out their dream every single day. And and I couldn't stop smiling. And every single part of the show, I was like, oh, I get to do this and I get to do this. Oh, we're doing this challenge. And oh yeah, it was so fun. But at the flip side of that, I was initially really worried about going off first or seconds. Like you build this up in your head being a fan and you're going, I couldn't imagine anything worse than going through this whole journey and then going out after 2 days. And that does play on your mind. And it was really important that I found connections really quickly. And so me and Mark getting together as the visible hand and being able to bring together that big alliance, we wanted to set the narrative of the season. The worst thing that could have happened to me is if I was in a tribe with a whole bunch of like gym bros, like big guys that have a majority and everything like that. And then because I would be voted off, I definitely would be. I can get on with those people. I'm a bit of a chameleon. I can sort of find something in common with a lot of people, but ultimately I'd be seen as a liability. So we wanted to set the narrative of like, no, this season is not about strengths. This season is going to be about game players, about people that understand the game, and about people that I can work with and I can know their motivations. And that's what I wanted to do. And from that first Frankie vote, you could see everything started to follow that pattern that we'd set up. You can see the Rebels tribe, they went after the Cuddle Club straight away. Would that have happened if we hadn't gone after Frankie? Maybe not. But we've set up a precedent. And I think I wanted to make this like the best season ever. I wanted to keep big players in. I wanted to keep people around as shields, and that would make things fun. And I think that's what we've got. And we're having a hell of a season so far.
You could not have said that better myself, right? So like that, y'all definitely set the tone of this season. Alex and I have talked a little bit about, we've seen kind of a shift in some of the gameplay of the season. And I think part of that, right, is your efforts and the Middle-Aged Mafias early on. Talk to us about kind of what brought y'all together. Was it that strategy, or what connections brought the Middle-Aged Mafia together?
So from my perspective, I actually wanted to have a couple of different alliances. I wanted to get one of the older women on board, because I feel like that's a really interesting dynamic. And I think it's someone that they're looking for an alliance, because they know it's really hard for those people to get through the first part of the game. Get to the second part of the game, once we get to merge, they're usually pretty golden because people aren't targeting them anymore. So I knew that those sort of people would be looking for relationships. Like I need someone to form a group around. Mark, we found just kindred spirits in terms of our outlook on the game and how much we understood the game. So we connected really quickly about that. I talked about movies and films a lot with people, and that just opened a lot of doorways to have some chats. Like those first votes, I was getting on with sort of Nathan and Winna and those guys. We were having some great conversations. But once I got in with sort of Kitty, I made that connection with Kitty. Then Kitty brought in sort of Caroline into the mix. I had a connection with Mark. Mark brought in the V's. And that was the key to being the invisible hand. We didn't want to be seen as the one person going, hey guys, everyone come to us. We're going to control things. It was, I brought in a few people. He brought in a few people, and we created this majority. And then from that point on, we had a really good understanding of the game. But interestingly, there was one point where Kitty, Caroline, and Mark all had a conversation. This was pretty early on together. And they were talking about how loyal I was and whether I was like really involved. And Mark and Kitty were like, no, Caroline, he's with us. He's all in. Mark then told me about that conversation. And at that point, I knew I needed to be the fulcrum between these people. So I spent a lot of time building my relationship with Kitty, and then building my relationship with Mark, and actually trying to separate those guys out a bit. And I would drop little seeds about making distrust between Caroline and Mark. And that sort of grew as the season went, because I wanted to be the person in the middle. I wanted to be the person that everyone comes to go, hey, do you think we should do this? And then I can control the narrative. I spent a lot of my season keeping Caroline and Mark sort of at our odds, but also not getting them to vote for each other. Like I had to talk Caroline down a lot, being like, no, let's not go Mark yet. Let's not go Mark yet. And then Mark on the other side, I kept having to defend Caroline and swing the votes and change the votes to save Caroline. But ultimately, it was what was keeping me in this control PowerPoint position moving forward. So it was a very interesting dynamic, the Middle-Aged Mafia.
That is incredible. I love hearing that. I was going to ask you what, we saw Mark, vote for Caroline a few times, Kitty a few times, and just at this trip. And I was going to ask you how you felt about Mark going after those two, but it sounds like you were kind of in the middle of that. Is that correct? Or how was that? Yeah.
Yeah. And me and Mark had an understanding that we were never going to target each other. We could take out each other's allies, and we were not going to hold grudges. We were just going to move forward in the game, because ultimately there was a bit of a plan. Me and Mark, the dream scenario was me and Mark, the final Tribal Council, going head on head in one of the greatest final council battles of all time. That was the dream that we had sort of talked about. And what's great in that situation is I think Mark has the confidence to think that he could beat me in the end. And you want someone to think that they could take you to the end. But I also was like, I've got enough of a play here that I could beat him in the end. And you've got that great situation where both people think they can beat each other. So they both have incentive for taking each other. I knew once I did a few of these plays, though, once the V's were sort of cut out from underneath him, I could really show that, oh yeah, look, I was the one that was helping this happen, and Mark was the one that was sort of chasing his tail for a bit of the game. And so I felt confident in getting through, but that was the dream situation for me moving forward. Would have been great.
Yeah. Well, maybe you those seeds of distrust that you planted, I think, sprouted a little bit too quickly than maybe you anticipate. But right, so that is the story of the early part of the OG Titans, especially after the swap and even into this merge, is Caroline versus Mark. But we saw in this last episode, you try to start to rally everyone together and make a move with your alliance, in particular the episode before voting out Winna. How did you guys land on Winna in particular, as you brought in Ferris, Eileen, and Raymond?
Well, it was very interesting because that vote, like the vote before where Scotty went home, Kitty was gone. Kitty was on the chopping block, and it became very apparent that we had lost that sort of control. And so the girls, like, good on them, they went full balls to the wall, and they were just like talking to everyone, and it worked. It looks, sometimes that's really risky because you can look really sketchy, but in this position, they talked to Ferris. Ferris was on board. They dangled the carrot of like, hey, do you want to do this? Do you want to get rid of one of these people? And they jumped at it. Now, what was interesting in this group, this new majority that sort of formed, it was, so you got Ferris, Ray, Eileen, and Alex, and then you got me, Caroline, and Kitty. So that's 3 into 7 is not a majority. If Brad Culpepper knows this, we know this. Like, it's not going to work, right? So I knew at that point that things were not like great for me. I also pitched in that vote. I actually wanted to get Valeria out. I think she had just won the 60K. She was really good at balancing, and it would make Mark have sort of one less really strong ally. Ferris and Ray were pretty adamant on Winna. They were like, no, it's got to be Winna. So it was at that point that I realized I didn't have enough agency in this group. I was just going to be a number that just got taken along. And then when that group wanted to work with Kirby again, they would then vote us off. So I could see the writing on the wall. I could also see the fact that Kirby and Ferris weren't targeting each other straight away after having this Cold War for so long, sort of raised my alarms to be like, I think there's a rebel strong undercurrent here. The fact that they're keeping each other around is really worrying. If they'd come to us and said, hey, I've got to get revenge on Kirby, or hey, I've got to get revenge on Ferris at some point, I would have been much more comfortable working with them. But knowing that, I was like, hang on, something's not right here. So at that point, I then realized I need to create something new. I need to get all these people on board, and I need to take out one of Ferris's generals in that point. We knew Ferris had an idol. We'd already seen he's not great at playing idols for other people. Eileen told him point blank, play it for Garrick. He did not. So I was pretty confident going for Ray that he wasn't going to do that. And so that was the plan moving forward. And this new group, for me, look, it probably wasn't great for the girls, Caroline and Kitty. They had more of a relationship with Ferris. I didn't. This was purely something that I wanted to create because I wanted to, again, be that fulcrum. I wanted to have the relationship with Kitty and Caroline, have the relationship with Mark and Valeria, have Jaden on board. I felt in that group, I was really well insulated with shields and stuff like that. So moving forward for me, that was actually really great. And there was just a few things that came together where it all sort of fell apart. But it was a sound plan. Yes, I could have just stayed in the game, not done anything, gone under the radar, and then been blindsided. But what fun is that? Like, I'm here to play Survivor. Like, honestly, like, it's a once in a lifetime thing. And I felt my game at that point was starting to get away from me. And I wanted to do something. Look, yes, I had a bit of big move-itis, like the fever came through, but ultimately it was a sound plan and it just didn't quite come together. I think some of the things, like, I think the girls were really nervous about it. And I think that became evident with Ferris sort of picked up on a bit of that. I think if we'd all just stuck to the plan, if we'd gone, hey guys, this is what we're doing, trust me, this is happening, and we'd all just gone our separate ways, I actually think it would have worked a treat. They would have all voted on Riri. Riri would have used her idol. And then the minority of votes would have been on Ray, and he would have gone home. But even then, moving forward into that vote, I still thought, even if it was a 6-on-6, it logically doesn't make sense for them to put votes on me, because you want to put votes in a split onto someone that people are going to flip on. So you put it on Caroline, you put it on Valeria. Those guys are not going to rocks for each other any day of the week. So to put it on me and almost have it go to rocks is crazy. And logically, I was like, well, no one's going to do that, because if these guys are going to support me, and no one would have seen Jaden flipping on the cards. No one was thinking, oh, Jaden really wants to get revenge, because again, he voted with us this first round. Like he was on board with us. It wasn't like he had some grand plan to flip the vote or to go anywhere else. He was on board. And if things had worked out, it would have, again, probably would have been on Caro with that. And those guys would have flipped, and I could have lived to fight another day. But yeah, ultimately, Jaden did what Jaden did, and I do feel like we were robbed the first rock draw in Australian Survivor history, because that was on the cut. This was Millennials versus Gen X, final 12, 6-on-6. Yeah. Like, this is what I was like, oh wow, this is happening. This is happening. And you know what's even crazier? Jaden was immune. He wouldn't have had to have picked rocks, which doesn't make any sense.
That's a great point. Yeah, absolutely. The best part about a rock draw too is you would be safe at that point.
Exactly. I know. It would have been, it would have been epic. But sorry, I've just got on a roll. I've been talking your ear off.
You're great. I think so a question I do have, right? It's an edited TV show. We don't get to see everything. Was there any discussion that happened when we realized it was a tied vote before y'all went to go do a revote?
There was not.
Okay.
It was literally, and I'm honestly, in hindsight, I wish I'd been a bit more like, guys, no, this is what, and I could have grabbed Kirby and Caroline and I could have gone, yeah, this is what's happening. Mm-hmm. But it was what you saw on television was it. It was first vote. Okay, guys, now what's happening? This is happening. You guys aren't voting. Everyone else is voting. And then JLP literally called up the first person and suddenly it was happening. And in hindsight, if there had been an opportunity, I could have pled the case. I could have said, Kirby, do you want to go to Rocks Array? Because again, I don't think they were fully, like a lot of those guys fully understood this second round of voting. Yeah. Because once we go to that, then it becomes a discussion where we have to become unanimous. And there was no way Kitty was turning on me. There was no way like these guys were doing it. And there's no way Ferris was turning on Ray. So we would have gone to Rocks at that vote.
Wow.
So yeah, and there was no time. I felt that was probably the one thing I was like, look, if we had had a discussion there, I really feel like I could have flipped the game. But when you're in that moment and JLP is doing his thing, you're just like, I have to defer to the Lord Savior JLP.
Oh, that's so good. Well, Edith, you have answered so many questions we had. We appreciate it so much. The one final question we have for you, as a movie buff, what is the movie or maybe character that you feel like defines your Survivor experience?
Oh, that's a good one. I think there's a couple of movies that come to mind. Probably Super Bad, with where I went out not making the jury. Maybe what else we got? We got maybe Fear and Loathing. Fear and Loathing could be a good one. Although I do love, I'm a big Nolan fan. So I think Inception is quite a good thing because I was doing a lot of things under the radar. There was an alliance within an alliance. We had the invisible hand. I think that's where I'd sit. I just need one of those spinning tops to see whether it was a dream or not.
Oh, that's so good. Well, Edith, thank you so much for your time today. It was absolute pleasure. Hope to chat with you again at some point in the future on our podcast. You are always welcome. Hope you enjoy watching the rest of the season along with us, and hope you have a good rest of your day.
Oh, thank you so much, guys. Love it. Hopefully talk to you again soon.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Absolutely. Thanks, Eden.